and they're scattering throughout the world. And Jerusalem would continue to be trampled down by the Gentiles. But there's a time limit given here. Consider the fact that the word until is crucial. Now, just to put it in Texanese, for I'm a Texan, let's make it as simple as possible. The conjunction until means certain things that were going on during the past are coming to an end, and then something new is going to start. Now, what has been going on in this prophecy? The people of Israel were going to be scattered throughout every nation. They were going to fall by the edge of the sword, and Jerusalem would continually be trampled underfoot by the Gentiles. But then comes the conjunction until. It means there's something different going to happen after this. You see, Jesus shows there's still a plan for these people. In Matthew 25, beginning with verse 31, Jesus, in another prophecy, clearly shows that there's going to be a segregation when he comes back at the second advent. When he comes to the earth, the first thing he's going to do is gather all the surviving Gentiles apart from Israel. Jesus will separate the surviving Gentile believers as sheep from the goats. They go to his right hand. The goats are the unbelievers. They go on his left. And it means that they are no longer his representatives in the world as they had been in the church age. During the church age, there is no distinction between Jew and Gentile, according to the book of Ephesians especially. But from the tribulation onward, there's a segregation. Ezekiel chapter 20 shows that the Israelites are going to be judged in an entirely different place at the second advent of Christ, out by Mount Sinai. And there the believers among them are going to be separated from the unbelievers. So Jesus shows there is a future for the Israelites, and the covenants are still binding to them even after this terrible judgment. Now let's go to what I call hope in the olive tree. There are some tremendous lessons we can learn from Romans chapters 9, 10, and 11. The Apostle Paul wrote those chapters to silence the people within the church who even at that time were becoming anti-Semitic. In chapter 9, he shows that Israel in the past was elected. Chapter 10 shows Israel in the present is rejected. But chapter 11 shows Israel in the future accepted. Romans 11 verse 22 says, "Consider therefore the kindness and sternness of God, sternness to those who fell, but kindness to you, provided that you continue in this kindness. Otherwise, you," now this is speaking generally of the Gentiles as contrasted with the Israelites as a group, "you will also be cut off. And if they, the Israelites, do not persist in unbelief, they'll be grafted in, for God is able to graft them in again." After all, if you Gentiles were cut out of an olive tree that is wild by nature, and contrary to nature were grafted into a cultivated olive tree, how much more readily will these, the Israelites, the natural branches, be grafted into their own olive tree? Now let's stop for a moment and think about that. What does the olive tree symbolize? This is obviously an allegory. The olive tree symbolizes the promises and covenants of the eternal relationship with God that was first vouchsafed and given to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and passed on to their descendants. So they are the cultivated olive tree that possesses these things. Now, as discipline, some of the branches were cut out, and Israel is under a partial judicial blinding right now. In part, that is. But the point is, there's still this covenant. Now let's go on to the rest of this quote from Romans 11. Paul says, "I do not want you to be ignorant of this mystery, brothers, so that you may not be conceited. Israel has experienced a hardening in part until," now there's that word again, the conjunction until. In other words, they're in a partial hardening until what? Until the full number of the Gentiles has come in. You see, this is referring back to the exact thing that Jesus referred to in Luke 21 verse 24. The times of the Gentiles are completed when the full number of the Gentiles that are to be saved and brought into God's eternal family has come in. And then it says, and so all Israel will be saved. That is, after this, after the times of the Gentiles is finished, as it is written, the deliverer will come from Zion. He will turn godlessness away from Jacob. And this is my covenant with them when I take away their sins. As far as the gospel is concerned, they are enemies on your account. But as far as election is concerned, they are loved on account of the patriarchs, for God's gift and his call are irrevocable. Now let's summarize. The main issue of this context is that Israel is under a judicial blindness in part and removed from its place of calling as God's representatives on earth. The time of the Gentiles refers to the fact that a Gentile-dominated church is currently God's representative on earth. But this is only until the full number of Gentiles are saved and the times of the Gentiles come to a close. Then God is going to graft the Israelites back into the covenants given their forefathers, and they as a remnant will believe and inherit all the promises. Now, in the light of this, let's ask again the question, why should we support Israel? It becomes an issue of whether you're going to believe the God of the Bible or we're going to believe man-made theories. It's almost a contest in much of the world today between the God of the Bible and the Allah of the Quran. God is going to have his way, and the promise he made about putting a curse on those who curse Israel. Putting a curse on them means that we bring harm to them, that we don't help them or bless them. Those conditions apply to our country right now. The United States of America is progressively turning against Israel. Our leaders care nothing about the fact that God said Israel is the only land and the only people who have a title deed to the land they possess. And it's spelled out. We're making them give it up piece by piece until they have no defensible position against relentless enemies that outnumber them 40-1. God is not going to let that happen. But in the process, all those who forsake God's people will be destroyed. And we need to wake up as a country and support God's chosen people. Why? Because God said so. And if we're smart, we'll pay attention to what God says, because he keeps his threats as well as his promises. He will bring judgment on those who cause great suffering to those he has elected. Well, that's it for tonight, folks. God bless you. And I'll see you next week, God willing.